Hello, everyone. I'm Richard Sher, and welcome to our SquareOff special. It's called Racial Hatred and Violence in America, 60 years since Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. had a dream. Your panel, Billy Murphy, Tyrone Keyes, Robin Murphy, and Delegate Stephanie Smith. 60 years ago, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., from the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, began his most famous I Have a Dream address. In it, Dr. King decried economic disparity, quality of life issues, police brutality, and voter disenfranchisement. He said America had given Black Americans a check for equality that's been marked with insufficient funds. 60 years ago, this past Monday, days after two Black men and one Black woman were shot and killed at the Dollar General store in Jacksonville, Florida, murdered for only one reason: because they were Black. Stephanie, why don't you start?
Thank you, Richard. And again, it's good to be here with you fine people. Unfortunately, we're discussing something very disturbing. I want to just lift up with the event that happened in Jacksonville that ultimately left, people murdered just doing a mundane task like shopping, that the assailant attempted to gain entry to a nearby historically Black college before settling on the dollar store. And I think what's really kind of chilling about that is that HBCUs are experiencing a bit of a renaissance nationally. They're seeing a great uptick in interest, and in many cases are entering some of their largest classes in the history of these institutions. And when you consider what it represents as a place of safety and a place where you are able to really operate and move about kind of just as an individual, but not as a representative necessarily of a race all the time. You get to really just be yourself. I think it's something that has been overlooked by the press, that his first place, the first place he attempted to exercise this vicious act was in a place that people find sacred.
Let me talk for just 1 minute, then we'll get right back to the panel. Edward Waters University, a student told a security guard that this guy was putting on all kinds of equipment and doing things. He went and talked to the shooter, and the shooter got in his car, sped off. He jumped a curb. He almost hit a pole on the street. They say they called the sheriff to let him know. I'm not so sure that call was made. And so he went from there to the Dollar General. Robin, jump on in.
I think one, echoing Stephanie's sentiments about Black people finding places of safety that are being violated by racist behavior. This is reminiscent of what happened in the church in South Carolina. It's very similar, like just finding those places and interrupting and disrupting that with the most horrific level of violence. I think if I'm focusing on the kind of person who will sit in 2023 and decide to target someone because of race, I think that we need to look systemically into what is happening with people who are feeling disenfranchised in other areas of their lives and deciding to activate it through racial hatred. And I think that's something that we're absolutely not paying enough attention to.
Billy, then Tyrone.
We're going backwards, Richard, in the quest for racial justice ever since the Trump administration, because he gave license to all of the racists in America, that their voices should be heard and heard loud, and that their behavior should be in attack mode rather than passive. And so gone are the days where racists kept quiet because they would be ashamed to reveal their racism, and now they're proud. And this on the 60th anniversary of the March on Washington, which I attended. Not the 60th anniversary, but the original march. Makes me very sad. We have a Supreme Court that is against anti-racism. It is not willing to fight racism. We are now in a period where they are taking us backward by abandoning and declaring illegal affirmative action. There are going to be lots of lawsuits. You already see them starting in almost every state to undo anything that smacked of affirmative action. And so the courts are now going to be besieged by litigation that's going to set us back. And it's going to be repeated litigation. And the laws will get stronger in favor of setting us back, because that's the nature of this Supreme Court, which has the lowest confidence publicly of any Supreme Court in my lifetime. The worst reputation.
Yeah, and absolutely. When Delegate Smith was talking about the sacred places, that did remind me of the Dylan Ruth thing. And I also agree with Robin in that that analysis needs to be done to figure out what is going on to make someone feel that disenfranchised, that they can be triggered by the color of someone's skin to take this type of action. And look, you know, we think about these things when we go through our daily lives, and you're in church, you may be in the supermarket, or, you know, in a college classroom. So this hits home because these places are places where we all frequent. And we know now that in the minds of these individuals, the only criteria is the color of your skin. So like Robin said, what is the forensics of that? How can we figure out how to interrupt that?
Well, Tyrone,
Well,
I think we know some of the answers.
sociologically, there's a direct correlation between, you know, forensically and scientifically, we need, and mental health wise, we need to get there. But to pretend that there is not a direct, and I'm not saying you are pretending this, Tyrone, I'm saying that none of us should pretend that there's not a direct correlation to the vitriol and in our politicization of our country right now. There's a direct correlation in Florida between deciding that books about Jackie Robinson breaking the race barrier need to be banned and that guy thinking it's okay to go kill Black people. There's a direct line between what's happening in our politics and a guy like that person thinking that they have a right to kill Black people.
I also think that we could just look to history, right? I mean, Jim Crow was the response to Reconstruction. And in many ways, what we're seeing right now is a response to the election of a Black president, and to seeing people of very colors and hues excel and begin to see more economic empowerment. These are all things that can be very socially disruptive. And I think we often forget what W.E.B. Du Bois spoke about, you know, people getting paid in the emotional wages of whiteness. If you are low on the socioeconomic ladder, the one thing that made you feel like you had some significant social currency was your whiteness. And I think some people feel the potency of whiteness to make up for their mediocrity or any other lesser status they have. The seeming feeling that is slipping away as being something as a trump card, no pun intended. I think for some people, it creates a lot of anxiety, because no matter what they didn't have, being white was supposed to mean something in this country. And for some people, the fact that it meant something in the wake of inequity for others is irrelevant. They just want to feel more important. So I think we don't really need to have like a survey. History can inform why we're in the place we are right now.
Billy, let me ask you. Billy, I'm going to ask you a question, then I'd like to hear your comment.
Okay.
Racial issues of today are eerily similar to the issues back in 1963. The undercurrent of it all is that Black people are still the economically poorest in America. And why does this racism continue? And why can't we all, it sounds trite, why can't people just get along, mind their own business? Billy?
Well, what we forget, because, you know, look, pardon me, everybody, I love you all, but I think we're being euphemistic in describing what's going on. The root of racism has to be, and cannot be explained otherwise, that we are subhuman. And so there is an anger when subhuman beings get authority in America. How dare a monkey run this country? That was the undercurrent and the overcurrent when all of the conservative leadership in the Republican Party met on the night of Barack Obama's inauguration to make sure that he would be an unsuccessful president and that none of his initiatives would be passed. it was a reaction. How dare Black people in America, how dare they believe in any way that they are equal to whites? And unless we deal with this root cause of racism and understand that there are huge geographical areas in this country where the majority of people in America are racist, that they talk to one another in racist ways, that their education system does not try to eliminate racist thinking, that their science community does not teach them that everyone comes from Africa, for example. So we have an ignorant, racist population that is recalcitrant, and we're not attempting to teach them otherwise. And so what DeSantis is doing in Florida is just a codification of what's already happened around the country, where Black history is not taught in any public school, in any state. And so that's severe racism. And we're moving back to that as an overt ideology because there are too many racists in white America, and Trump has them corralled. Trump has their emotional support. Trump gets them riled up. Trump moves them in racist directions. And, without even calling Trump a racist, which he is, racists seem to think he's one of them. And so we have a big problem. And if he gets elected again, it's going to get a whole lot worse.
All right. On that note, Billy, that was very eloquent. We're going to take a quick break as we introduce, of course, the voice of SquareOff, Howard Mallison. We have 4 great sponsors. Please support them. We'll get back to our discussion of racism in America after Howard.
Thank you, Richard. This is the perfect time of year to visit Pappas restaurants and sports bars. With the Ravens and the Orioles in a hot pennant race, what could be better than going to a Pappas sports bar with screens everywhere and watching one of those games if you don't want to fight the traffic of going down to the stadium? And it's a great crab cake, or as Richard calls it, a fab cake. It's Oprah's favorite. They ship everywhere, all over the country. They got a great menu of everything. So take the family out to Pappas. You'll really enjoy it. And also, Leading Edge Auto Body and Mechanical Repair want you to know that the insurance companies cannot tell you where to take your car. Richard and Annabelle Sher have gotten their cars repaired and problems and with the service for years there, and are very happy and satisfied customers. They work on all makes and models. They offer free pickup anywhere in Baltimore. Call Leading Edge at 410-433-0433 or visit them at 5807 Falls Road in Mount Washington. They make your car look and run like new again. Now back to you, Richard.
Okay, Howard, thank you very, very much. Well, the Jacksonville murders come as Black communities are still reeling from other racial attacks, including last year's killing of 10 Black grocery shoppers in Buffalo, New York, and the murders of 9 churchgoers in Charleston, South Carolina. Many Blacks and other minorities are worried today, according to reports, that media attention and intense rhetoric may have emboldened more extremists, as Billy was saying. They fear that the racially motivated attacks, which remind them of more violent times in the nation's history, will continue. Tyrone.
Well, I mean, you have to report it. I mean, there are people that are actually losing their lives. So the media has to report that, especially that case that happened, I believe it was Buffalo, in the supermarket. They had video of that, and it was horrendous because there was nothing these people could do. So I think that's an unfair charge on the media. They're obligated to report, ignore these cases when they occur.
100% agree. Yeah, I 100% agree with Tyrone. There's also a situation where if it's not reported, I, as a member of the Black community, would wonder the same reason why I wonder why a missing Black woman gets less attention. I need the media to be on it at all times, and I need us to find other ways to tamp down copycats or or anything like that. Social media will take care of that for us anyway. The media doesn't even have anything to do with it or any control over it anymore. People are going live on Facebook to kill people.
And that when the media follows that case from start to finish, and you demonstrate the end result of these heinous acts, you know, I don't know how many states still have the death penalty, but then maybe that's also a way to connect your actions to some pretty severe outcomes.
You know, the media has actually positively been responsible for jurisdictions being pressured to charge or to follow through with a case. If there is attention on a case, then it allows for scrutiny to the public process.
Like the case where the officers killed the guy and they had it on tape. He was actually not involved in any criminal activity, and he got, I forget the guy's name, but that was important that they were able to capture that, because what are you going to believe, PIO of the police department or your lying eyes, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
And then let's don't forget that we wouldn't have made the progress we made in the past 10 years had it not been for cell phone video cameras and what they recorded being broadcast far and wide through the country. It was shocking to a lot of people that we were right after all, after years of complaining in vain, that the police acted this way.
We were right.
And even before that, the Rodney King video, which was captured on, you know, the shoulder thing, but it was that started it all, you know.
But that white community that had the jurisdiction over the trial in California acquitted the cops, and the federal government saw the tape just like the rest of America did, and rushed in and did a prosecution that was much more effective and got a conviction.
True.
The persistence of racism in this country is responsible for why we have Roe versus Wade being overruled. And let me explain. The one thing that higher level thinkers in the racist part of the white community are afraid of is the low birth rate in white America. And they look at the numbers and they see that by 2050, according to most estimates, this is going to be a minority run country. If women are involved, Latinos and Blacks and Asians. And this terrifies white racists who work at the highest level in many of our institutions and companies. And so the need for abandoning the permissive nature of abortions in America comes directly from wanting to increase the white birth rate. And so now, literally, they're so desperate about the white birth rate because it's negative that they are trying to force white women to have children. That's what I think is behind the reversal of Roe versus Wade.
Billy, I think it's both wanting to ensure that white women carry children to term, but I think it's also to ensure that you have a permanent underclass of people of color who are not able to rise above their economic situations because of what it means to have a child when you're not economically in the position to do so. I mean, people's entire lives are fundamentally changed if they have to have a child at 15, 16 years old. I mean, we have children. There was an article, I think in the Post recently, of a 13-year-old girl in Mississippi who was raped by a stranger and had to have the child because there was nowhere else for her to receive reproductive health care. And her family was so desperately poor in Mississippi, they couldn't get to a state that could provide her. So she has to take care of a child through such traumatic circumstances and deep poverty. And this is a girl who dreams to be a nurse. What are the likelihood that she'll be able to achieve that economic dream for herself, saddled with a responsibility people 20 years older than her can barely figure out?
Well, I understand that is an effect.
It's a twofer. They want both.
Of that, but I'm not sure I agree with you that that's part of the motivation because.
Oh, absolutely.
No, let me.
They need poor people to stay black.
Let me explain why, Stephanie. Let me explain why. Whites have always been, racist whites have always been upset that there are too many babies being made in the Black community, to the point where the history is they wanted us sterilized. you could see examples of that in
Of
court
course.
cases.
I'm familiar with that
And
history.
so this is a different phenomenon. This is where they are trying to increase the white birth rate. But I don't believe the emphasis is on making more black babies, because that
No,
would be
it's ensuring that
contrary
they'll be
to
poor
that
when they do
motivation.
rise.
It's just an added
added bonus.
byproduct.
That's correct. It's a byproduct.
And let me go back
Acceptable
real
one.
quick, and the guy's name was Tyree Nichols.
Oh yeah, I do remember
I
that.
think,
Yeah.
right. I think that it's important that we mention his name, and that was his name, who I was referring to, Tyree Nichols.
Oh, is that
Can
your
I mention
point?
something? Oh, so go
I
ahead.
had I mentioned earlier that this incident occurred, but his name escaped me momentarily.
Rich, I just
Thank
want
you
to
for putting
mention
the name on.
something that I think society is generally lazy about, and I include white, black, and everyone else. How many of us have heard this notion, the next generation will save us? That lazy hope that through some passive, automatic continuation of time, people are just going to be better is largely part of where we're at. And that's, I'm sure, seeping into newsrooms, schools, families. There are people, both black and white, that assume that new generations of people simply won't be this way. Dylan Roof was what, 19? This guy in Florida, 21? This notion that the next generation will somehow not be affected by the parents and grandparents they've been exposed to is just incredibly naive. And I think a lot of people of goodwill have to acknowledge that part too.
Robin, I want to hear from you, please.
I mean, I think that's the same notion that some people have, that we should no longer point to white supremacy and slavery as having been impactful, because my peer today, 40-year-old white women today, had nothing to do with it. And so we should therefore stop talking about it because it makes them feel bad. So I think that's along the same lines of what Delegate Smith is saying. Is just like there's both this laziness that somebody else will fix it, and this shyness that we should not even bring it up today because it's irrelevant. And all of it is pretty sad. I want to also just shine a light on the fact that there are lots of things that are continuing to happen today that show just how little we actually care for Black bodies. And it shows up in so many ways now that are different from before, because people are analyzing other ways that it can show up. Right. And so I look at, I think that policing is still overly harmful to Black men in particular. There's no equity in policing. There's no equity in the way that Black men are handled on the street. And so I think that trickles down into people having a behavior of, I can take less care with this particular human being. And I think that's really unfortunate. And these are people that don't even consider themselves racist. My son, who's in his early 20s and a new driver, was driving my car, and I have a pretty nice car and it's pretty new, and I drive it every single day, and I am never just stopped by the police, ever. And the very first time he drove my car, he was.
Boy.
And was simply, and he asked with hands on 10 and 2, did I do anything wrong? And the officer's response was, no. But you think you can disrupt his day and his life and his whatever and put him on high alert, and he's a new driver and he's nervous and all these things. I just don't think we care. We do not take care with Black bodies and Black people the way that we take care with others.
We got to stop when we come back.
And that's right.
Hold on, stop. When we come back, I have some stats on Black incidents and hate crimes in this country. Serious show. Here's Howard Mallison one more time. Howard, are you there?
I'm here. If you're a lawyer looking for a career opportunity, you're in luck. The law offices of Barry Glazer have openings for lawyers and law clerks. If you're interested in medical malpractice, Barry's the place to go. He has a doctor on staff, and he doesn't apologize for getting every penny he can from those insurance companies. Give Barry a call at 410-547-8668. For a great breakfast, lunch, or dinner, take the whole family out to the Double T Diner. TT, they're everywhere, and it means totally terrific. In Catonsville, White Marsh, Perry Hall, Pasadena, Annapolis, the EC Diner in Ellicott City. And for a change of pace on Monday nights, try By the Docks for lobster night. It's all owned by the Double T family. Back to you, Richard.
All right, I do want to make one correction. I think we had a typo on our leading edge auto body. The phone number is 410-433-6433. And I promise you're going to be happy with leading edge. They're terrific. All right, so hate crimes in this country have increased in the United States almost every year since 2014. 7,314 hate crimes were reported last year, up from the previous year. My question to you all, do you think there's ever going to be racial equality in this country?
Well, it might not come in our lifetimes, but there's got to be, because look, if you don't like this complexion or, you know, that creed, Earth is becoming more of a global community. So I really don't know where you're going to go and not find someone who doesn't look like you or doesn't have the same, you know, beliefs that you do. So, you know, I would hope that that would happen. But even when you look at more homogenous societies, you still find strife of some sort. Look at the whole conflict that persisted between the British and the Northern Irelands, the Hutus and the Tutsis. So unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, one day we will grow out of this, you know, this predilection towards strife that we have as humans. Who knows?
I don't think that day is going to come. And I'll tell you why. There's no mechanism in place in the white communities anywhere to eliminate race hatred. There is no effort to be anti-racist in white communities all over the world. It's just not going on. It's not government policy. It should be. We forced it to be government policy after we beat the Germans in World War II, that they teach in their schools that Nazism was wrong, morally, politically. It was a sin against humanity. We made the Germans teach their people that. In Japan, when we beat the Japanese, MacArthur took over the school system, and one of the tenets in the school system was that the Japanese racism had to end. And they implemented all kinds of coursework to make sure that that happened. We've never done anything like that in America, even though racism is growing in this country and has never been eliminated significantly. Have we made some gains?
And we've
Absolutely.
actually allowed the opposite. We've made gains, and then we've allowed the opposite even. So what has happened is that, for example, the things in Florida curriculum in school designed to teach that slavery had benefits, when we haven't started teaching yet the absolute horrors of the Middle Passage. We don't even teach that, but now you roll it back, actually say that there were, you know, this was like slavery was an apprenticeship.
Well, look, there's all kinds of political pressure.
Hold on, Bill.
There's all kinds of political pressure. Let me make this one point. In every state in America, including Maryland, not to teach the history of stolen Africans who were forced to come to America under horrendous conditions and were forced into slavery, and their entire culture is wiped out so that they could be remade to have slave mentality. And so unless we teach this to people, they're going to remain ignorant about why we have racism and that racism is still prevalent in America.
Stephanie.
You're on mute.
Stephanie, you're muted.
You were muted.
I accidentally pressed it. I want to expand on what Billy was mentioning about what we haven't taught, but also connect it to who we've been. I think that racism has largely been accepted as just, it is what it is, even by many good liberals, white and so forth. But I think what's been more shocking to them is the rise and the embrace of authoritarianism. That's what's actually unsettling them more than the perpetuation of racism, because racism was normal. But to see Americans gravitate towards that type of authoritarian rhetoric, I mean, I'm a child of the 80s. I thought we knew who our enemies were through the Rocky movies. Seems like we haven't settled on who that is, but it just seems that I think that's what the breaking point is, because if you are like many of my white friends who are more liberal, you have an uncle, a parent, a grandparent, a neighbor, someone that has loved you, poured into you, shaped you, someone you respect that might carry some of these notions. And so there's an intimacy to the principle that needs to be corrected that's very different than me on the outside saying, why don't y'all get some of this stuff together? Whereas when they see people drawn to authoritarianism and to this type of political rhetoric, it feels more distant. They feel more ready to tackle that because it doesn't feel the same as tackling things that they've been exposed to their whole life by people they love and trust, even if they're disappointed that they hold those views. I think that's where people, they're not going to be honest about it because they don't want to necessarily expose the fact that some of their loved ones have these complicated feelings. But I think that's where the hesitancy is often rooted in.
Tyrone,
Well, you
what do
know, go ahead.
Go ahead, Billy. Go ahead, Billy.
I think the point you're making about the rise of authoritarianism is absolutely correct. And I'd like to amplify it in a way. Look, authoritarian leaders, fascists or Marxists, usually rise on the backs of socially discontented people. And racism is a driver of the resort to authoritarianism by angry racists. And so that's how Trump got the power. That's how he's trying to get the power again, by appealing to the angriest segment of America. And they're so angry with us. Oh my God, racists are just very, very ugly in their anger towards us. And we didn't do anything to them. What the hell did we do? And so they have to make up justifications like we're taking their jobs. I don't know any place in America where Black people are taking white folks' jobs. I just don't. And all of these notions are being sold to a very angry group of racists in America who want their racism to be embraced by someone with authoritarian power. And there's a second vector that's leading us to authoritarianism. Our biggest enemies are authoritarian countries, China, Russia, and
North Korea.
Authoritarianism is growing because authoritarian countries can do things America can't do. They can plan, they can move quickly to change, they can adapt because one man is running the show. Now that doesn't mean they're going to be successful, but it means that they're currently that style of enemy, and we don't have the ability. We debate everything long past its expiration date. And so we can't plan. We're a democracy. It's messy. We can't decide what we're going to do in foreign policy because we debate everything too long. It's very difficult for us to move quickly. And so in America, at the highest levels of leadership, we're seeing a movement towards authoritarian rule. Bush appointed judges who believed in expanding presidential power. So did Trump. And so we're seeing an organized effort to make the presidency much more powerful than it's ever been, in part so we can deal with authoritarian enemies.
All right, guys, listen up. This is very stimulating, very interesting, but unfortunately, we've run out of time. And I want to thank Stephanie. I want to thank Tyrone, Billy, and Robin, of course, and all of you, the thousands of you who are now regular viewers on SquareOff.net for your support. And we will continue going on. And we hope you're safe, healthy, and will join us next time when once again we square off. Wave goodbye, everybody. See you.